Hello everyone, tonight our story is about a hidden sanctuary where time moves differently, where worries dissolve like morning mist, and where a magnificent willow tree holds secrets that have been waiting centuries to be discovered. This is the story of the Whispering Windress, a place where weary souls find exactly what they need even when they don't know what that is. Dr. Elena Marsh had always been someone who noticed details others missed. As a botanist specializing in ancient trees, she had spent her career cataloging the remarkable specimens that dotted the English countryside. But on this particular autumn evening, as she walked along the overgrown path behind her grandmother's cottage in the Cotswolds, she noticed something that made her pause and catch her breath. The cottage had been left to her 6 months ago, along with its sprawling, untended garden. Elena had been meaning to explore the property thoroughly, but her demanding research schedule had kept her away. Now, finally taking a sabbatical to settle her grandmother's affairs, she found herself drawn to the furthest corner of the grounds as the golden light of late afternoon filtered through the canopy above. There, almost completely hidden by a tangle of ivy and wild roses, stood an ornate iron gate. The metalwork was exquisite, intricate scrollwork depicting leaves and vines intertwined with symbols she didn't immediately recognize. Despite years of neglect, the gate showed no signs of rust, its dark iron surface gleaming as if it had been polished just that morning. Elena approached slowly, her trained eye taking in every detail. The gate was perhaps 8 feet tall, set into what appeared to be a very old stone wall that curved away into the dense foliage on either side. Moss covered much of the stonework, but she could make out the weathered remains of carved symbols, similar to those on the gate itself. What struck her most was the silence. The usual sounds of the countryside birds calling, leaves rustling in the breeze, the distant hum of traffic from the village roads seemed muffled here, as if the very air was holding its breath. Elena reached out tentatively to touch the gate, and to her surprise, it swung open at the lightest pressure, moving soundlessly on hinges that should have been seized with age. Beyond the gate lay a path unlike any she had ever seen. The walkway was made of stones that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, each one perfectly fitted to its neighbors without mortar or obvious design. The stones themselves were unlike anything in her geological knowledge. They appeared to be a type of quartz, but with an opalescent quality that made them seem almost alive. On either side of the path, vegetation was lush and verdant despite the late season. While the world outside was preparing for winter, here everything remained in a state of perpetual late spring. Flowers she recognized: roses, lavender, lavender, jasmine bloomed alongside species she had never encountered, their fragrances creating a complex perfume that seemed to calm her racing thoughts. Elena stepped through the gate and immediately felt a subtle shift in the air around her. The atmosphere was different here, not just warmer, but somehow more substantial, as if each breath contained more oxygen, more life than what she was accustomed to. Her footsteps on the luminous stones made no sound, and she found herself moving forward as if drawn by an invisible current. The path wound gently through the garden, following what seemed to be a natural curve in the landscape. Ancient trees lined the way, oaks that must have been centuries old, their massive trunks covered in moss that glowed softly in the filtered light. Between them, smaller trees and shrubs created intimate spaces, each one carefully arranged as if by an invisible gardener with centuries of patience. As Elena walked deeper into the garden, she began to notice that the plants themselves seemed to be responding to her presence. Flowers turned slightly toward her as she passed, leaves rustled without any breeze to move them. and she could swear she heard something that sounded almost like whispered conversations coming from the vegetation. Around her, the path led gradually upward, following the natural contours of what she now realized was a small hill. The climb was gentle, almost imperceptible, but as she gained elevation, she began to catch glimpses of the garden's full scope through breaks in the canopy. The space was far larger than should have been possible given the size of her grandmother's property. The garden seemed to stretch in all directions, filled with winding paths, hidden groves, and what appeared to be several small structures scattered throughout the grounds. But it was what lay ahead that truly took her breath away. At the crest of the hill, the path opened into a circular clearing perhaps 50 feet across. The space was bordered by a ring of standing stones, each one carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change when Elena wasn't looking directly at them. The stones were far older than anything else she had seen in the garden, and they radiated a sense of deep time and patient waiting. At the center of the clearing stood the most magnificent tree Elena had ever encountered. It was a weeping willow, but one that defied every expectation she had about the species. This tree was enormous, its trunk easily 20 feet in diameter, its bark a silvery gray that seemed to hold light within its deep furrows. The massive canopy of drooping branches created a natural tent around the base of the tree, their leaves rustling with a sound like gentle rain even though there was no wind. But it was the tree's voice that stopped Elena in her tracks. "Welcome, dear one," came a whisper that seemed to emanate from the very air around her. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but something that encompassed all possibilities of human speech. It was warm and welcoming, tinged with an ancient wisdom that made Elena feel both humbled and oddly comforted. Elena stood frozen, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was experiencing. Trees didn't speak. This was a fundamental fact of her professional life. Yet here she was, in a garden that shouldn't exist, listening to a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I know this challenges everything you believe," the voice continued, gentle amusement coloring its tone. "But sometimes, child of science, we must step beyond the boundaries of what we think we know to discover what we need to learn." You're speaking to me," Elena managed to whisper, her voice sounding strange and small in the profound quiet of the clearing. "I am. I have been waiting for you for a very long time, Elena Marsh. Your grandmother spoke of you often during her visits here. She said you would come when you were ready, when the weight of the world had grown too heavy for your shoulders to bear alone." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes at the mention of her grandmother. Margaret Marsh had been a remarkable woman, a retired librarian who had seemed to know something about everything, who had filled Elena's childhood with stories of magic and wonder that had seemed so real she had almost believed them. Margaret had died peacefully in her sleep 6 months ago, leaving behind only the cottage, the garden, and a note that had simply said, "The garden will call when you need it most." She knew about this place, Elena said, not quite a question. She was one of its guardians, the willow replied, as her grandmother was before her and her grandmother before that. The garden has existed for longer than human memory, but it has always needed those who could tend it, protect it, and help it serve its purpose. Elena moved closer to the tree, drawn by something she couldn't name. As she approached, she could see that the bark was inscribed with symbols similar to those on the standing stones, but these were different. They seemed to pulse with a soft light, as if illuminated from within. "What is its purpose?" she asked, reaching out to touch the ancient bark. The moment her fingers made contact, a wave of peace washed over her, so profound that she felt her knees weaken. She'd been carrying tension in her shoulders and neck. For months, the stress of her research, the pressure of academia, the grief of losing her grandmother, and suddenly all of it simply melted away. "The garden exists to heal," the willow said, its voice now seeming to come from all around her, from the very air itself. Not just bodies, though it can do that, but souls. Hearts, spirits worn thin by the demands of the world beyond these. Walls. People find their way here when they need sanctuary, when they need to remember who they were before the world told them who they should be. Elena leaned against the massive trunk, feeling the steady pulse of life within the ancient wood. It was like pressing her ear to the chest of the earth itself, hearing the slow, steady heartbeat of something far older and wiser than she could comprehend. "How long has it been here?" she asked. "Time moves differently within these walls," the willow replied. "The garden has existed for as long as there have been people who needed healing. It has been a sacred grove, a monastery garden, a place of pilgrimage, a witch's sanctuary. It adapts to the needs of each age, but its purpose remains constant." Around them, the garden seemed to settle into evening, though Elena couldn't tell if time was actually passing or if this was simply the natural state of things here. The light filtering through the willow's canopy took on a golden quality, and she could hear the soft sound of water somewhere nearby. "There's a spring," the willow said, responding to her unspoken question. "Beyond the grove of silver birches, past the herb garden where your grandmother liked to gather mint for her tea. The water has healing properties. It can wash away not just physical ailments, but emotional wounds as well." Elena closed her eyes and let herself simply exist in this moment. For the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. The constant churning of her mind, the endless list of tasks, the pressure of deadlines, the weight of expectations had quieted to a gentle murmur. She could feel her breathing slow, her heartbeat synchronized with the steady pulse of the tree against her back. "I don't understand how this is possible," she murmured. "Understanding is not always necessary," the willow replied. "Sometimes acceptance is enough. Sometimes we must simply allow ourselves to experience wonder without needing to explain it away." As Elena sat in the peaceful embrace of the ancient willow, she became aware of movement in the garden around her. Not the rustling of leaves or the scurrying of small creatures, but something more purposeful. Figures moved between the trees, translucent and shimmering like memories made visible in the golden light. "The garden's history," the willow explained, its voice soft and soothing. "Every soul who has found healing here leaves an echo, a blessing for those who come after. Your grandmother's essence is strong here. She spent many years learning the garden's secrets, understanding its needs." Elena watched in wonder as the ghostly figures went about their business. She could see what appeared to be monks in rough brown robes tending to herb gardens, their movements deliberate and meditative. In another area, she glimpsed women in flowing robes gathering flowers by moonlight, their faces serene and focused. All of them seemed to be working in harmony with the garden itself, each understanding their role in the greater tapestry of healing and growth. "They're all caretakers," Elena observed. "Guardians, keepers, healers, many names for the same calling," the willow agreed. "The garden chooses its own, usually from families who have served it for generations. But sometimes it calls to someone new, someone whose heart is ready to serve something greater than themselves." Elena felt a flutter of recognition in her chest. "Is that why I'm here? Is the garden choosing me?" That is something only you can answer, the willow said. But I will tell you this, the garden has been waiting for you specifically. Your grandmother prepared the way, but she knew. Her time was ending. The garden needs someone young enough to serve it for decades to come, someone with the knowledge to understand its botanical mysteries, and the heart to embrace its deeper magic. As if responding to the willow's words, the garden around them began to reveal more of its secrets. Elena could see pathways she hadn't noticed before, winding deeper into the grounds. She glimpsed what appeared to be a small cottage nestled among flowering vines, its windows glowing with warm light. In the distance, she could make out the gleam of water the spring the willow had mentioned. "There's so much here," she breathed. "The garden is vast," the willow confirmed. "Far larger than the space it occupies in your world. It exists partially outside normal reality, in a place where intention and need can shape physical space. Those who need solitude will find hidden groves where they can be alone with their thoughts. Those who need community will discover gathering spaces where they can share their burdens with others. The garden becomes what each visitor needs it to be." Elena stood up slowly, feeling somehow both energized and deeply relaxed. The peaceful presence of the willow had worked its magic on her, washing away months of accumulated stress and anxiety. She felt more like herself than she had in years, not the driven academic constantly pushing toward the next goal, but the curious child who had once spent hours exploring her grandmother's garden, making up stories about the flowers and trees. "Your grandmother left something for you," the willow said. "In the cottage beyond the rose garden. She said you would know when you were ready to receive it." Elena felt a pull toward the distant cottage, but something made her hesitate. If I accept this, if I become a guardian of the garden, what does that mean for my life, my career, my research? "The garden does not ask you to abandon your calling," the willow replied. "Your knowledge of plants and trees, your understanding of botanical systems, these are gifts that will serve the garden well. But you will find that your research takes on new dimensions, that you discover things about the natural world that cannot be found in any textbook or laboratory." Elena considered this. Her research had been feeling increasingly hollow lately, focused more on publishing papers and securing grants than on the genuine wonder and discovery that had first drawn her to botany. The idea of learning about plants and trees in a completely new way, of understanding their deeper mysteries and healing properties, sparked something in her that had been dormant for too long. And the people who come here, how do they find the garden? "They find it when they need it," the willow said simply, "just as you did. The garden calls to those who are ready to be healed, who are open to transformation. Some come seeking answers to specific problems, others arrive simply because they feel drawn to walk down an unfamiliar path. The garden welcomes all who approach with genuine need and an open heart." As Elena pondered this, she became aware of a subtle change in the quality of light around them. The golden glow was deepening, taking on the rich amber tones of sunset. Though she couldn't tell if this was the natural progression of day to night or simply another of the garden's mysteries. "Time works differently here," she said, more a statement than a question. "The garden exists in what you might call healing time," the willow explained. "Minutes can stretch into hours when someone needs more time to process their experiences. Or hours can pass like minutes when someone is ready to move forward quickly. The garden adjusts its rhythm to match the needs of those within its boundaries." Elena felt a deep sense of rightness about this place, about the choice that was being offered to her. Her life had been feeling increasingly disconnected from her. Deeper purpose focused on external achievements rather than internal growth. The idea of serving something greater than herself, of helping to maintain a sanctuary where people could find healing and peace, resonated with something fundamental in her nature. My grandmother, did she live in the cottage? She visited regularly, especially in her later years, the willow replied. She understood that the garden needed consistent care, that its magic required tending just like any other growing thing. She prepared the cottage for you, filled it with the tools and knowledge you would need to take on the role of guardian. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the clean, vital air of the garden fill her lungs. She had come here expecting to find nothing more than an overgrown corner of her grandmother's property. Instead, she had discovered a calling that spoke to every part of her being, her scientific mind, her spiritual longings, her desire to help others heal and grow. I accept, she said quietly, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. I accept the role of guardian. The moment she spoke, the garden around them seemed to come alive with a gentle joy. The willow's leaves rustled with what sounded like approval. Flowers throughout the clearing released their fragrances in a symphony of scent, and the very air seemed to shimmer with celebration. Welcome, guardian, the willow said, its voice warm with ancient pleasure. Your grandmother would be proud. Now come, let me show you the true heart of the garden, the place where the deepest healing happens. As Elena prepared to follow the willow's guidance deeper into the garden's mysteries, she felt a profound sense of coming home. This was where she belonged, where her gifts could serve their highest purpose. The garden had chosen her, and she had chosen it in return. The first chapter of her life as a guardian was about to begin. The willow's branches parted like curtains, revealing a narrow pathway that Elena hadn't seen before. This new path was different from the luminous stone walkway that had first led her into the garden. Here, the ground was carpeted with soft moss that glowed with a gentle phosphorescence, creating a natural lighting system that would guide visitors even in the darkest night. The garden has many layers, the willow explained as Elena began to walk along the moss-lit path. What you experienced first was the welcoming garden, the place where newcomers can begin to release their worldly concerns. But the deeper healing happens in the sacred spaces that lie beyond. The path wound through a grove of silver birches, their white bark gleaming in the ethereal light. Elena could hear the soft whisper of their leaves overhead, creating a gentle symphony that seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. As she walked, she noticed that her breathing had become deeper and more rhythmic, as if the very act of moving through the space was teaching her body how to relax. The birches are teachers. The willow's voice followed her, carried on the evening breeze. They understand the wisdom of letting go, of shedding what no longer serves. Many visitors spend time here, allowing the trees to help them release old patterns of thought and behavior that had been holding them back. Elena could feel the truth of this as she moved through the grove. Each step seemed to lighten her burden, washing away not just the stress of recent months, but deeper anxieties she had carried for years. The perfectionism that had driven her academic career, the fear of not being good enough, the constant need to prove herself, all of it began to dissolve in the gentle presence of the birch trees. The path curved around a small hill covered in what appeared to be wild lavender. The scent was intoxicating, but not overwhelming. It seemed to adjust itself to exactly the right intensity to promote calm and clarity. As Elena climbed the gentle slope, she could hear the sound of water growing stronger, a soft babbling that spoke of springs and streams. At the top of the hill, the path opened into another clearing, this one dominated by a series of natural pools fed by springs that emerged from the living rock. The water was crystal clear, And Elena could see that each pool was surrounded by different types of stones, some smooth river rocks, others rough granite, still others that appeared to be precious gems in their raw form. "The healing springs," the willow announced, its voice seeming to come from the water itself now. "Each pool serves a different purpose, addresses different types of wounds that people carry. The garden will guide you to the one you need most." Elena approached the pools slowly, marveling at their beauty. Some were small and intimate, barely large enough for one person to sit in comfortably. Others were larger, clearly designed for groups. The water in each pool was a slightly different temperature, she noticed, and some seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. She found herself drawn to a medium-sized pool surrounded by smooth stones that had been worn to perfect ovals by countless years of water flow. The stones were warm to the touch, and the water itself seemed to call to her, its surface rippling with an invitation she couldn't resist. "This is the pool of emotional healing," the willow explained. "It helps wash away the accumulated hurts and disappointments that we carry in our hearts. Your grandmother spent many hours here, especially after your grandfather passed away." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes at the mention of her grandfather. He had died when she was 15, and she had never fully processed the grief of losing him. In the years since, she had thrown herself into her studies, using academic achievement as a way to avoid dealing with the deeper emotions that frightened her. Without really thinking about it, she began to remove her shoes and socks, rolling up her trouser legs to wade into the pool. The water was perfectly warm, exactly the temperature of a comfortable bath. As she stepped in, she felt something shift inside her chest, as if a knot that had been tied there for years was finally beginning to loosen. "It's safe to feel here," the willow whispered. "The water will hold you, support you, help you process what you need to process. There is no judgment in the garden, no requirement to be strong or composed. Here you can simply be." Elena settled into the pool, feeling the warm water rise to her waist. As she sat there, images began to flow through her mind, memories of her grandfather, of the last conversation they had shared, of all the things she'd wanted to tell him but never had the chance to say. The tears came then, flowing freely for the first time in years, but these weren't tears of despair. They were tears of release, of acknowledgement, of finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of loss and love that she had been carrying. The water seemed to draw the emotions out of her, creating space for healing to begin. As she wept, Elena became aware of other presences in the clearing. Not the ghostly figure she had seen before, but something more immediate and comforting. She could feel her grandmother's presence, warm and loving, wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. And beyond that, she could sense her grandfather as well, his familiar laugh echoing softly in the evening air. "They're here," she whispered. "The garden is a place where the veil between worlds is thin," the willow confirmed. "Those who have passed on often visit here, drawn by the love of those who remain. They come to offer comfort, to help with the healing process." Elena felt a hand on her shoulder, gentle and familiar. She couldn't see anyone, but she knew without doubt that it was her grandfather's touch. The knot in her chest finally released completely, and she felt a wave of peace wash over her that was deeper than anything she had ever experienced. "I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye properly," she whispered. To the empty air, a warm breeze stirred the water around her, and she could swear she heard her grandfather's voice, kind and full of love. "You sang it now, little one. That's all that matters." Elena remained in the healing pool until the stars appeared. Overhead, their light reflecting in the still water like scattered diamonds. The emotional release had left her feeling both drained and renewed, as if she had purged years of accumulated pain and made space for something new to grow. When she finally climbed out of the pool, she found a soft towel waiting for her on the stone ledge, another of the garden's small miracles. As she dried off and put her shoes back on, she felt fundamentally changed. The grief was still there, but it had transformed from a sharp, cutting pain into something gentler, more manageable. A bittersweet acknowledgement of love and loss that she could carry without being overwhelmed by it. "There are others coming," the willow said as Elena prepared to leave the springs. "The garden calls to those who need healing, and tonight several have answered that call. Would you like to observe how the garden serves those who find there?" "Way here." Elena nodded, curious about how others might experience this magical place. The willow's branches rustled, and she heard the soft sound of footsteps on the distant paths. Following the willow's guidance, she made her way to a small grove overlooking the main garden pathways, where she could watch without intruding on the visitors' experiences. The first person to arrive was a middle-aged man in a business suit, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion. He walked slowly, as if each step required tremendous effort. Elena watched as he approached the main gate, which swung open for him just as it had for her. The moment he stepped through, his pace changed. His shoulders straightened slightly, and his breathing became more regular. "A successful businessman," the willow whispered. "But success in the outer world doesn't always translate to inner peace. He carries the weight of constant pressure, of never feeling like he's done enough. The garden will help him remember who he was before the world told him he had to be someone else." Elena watched as the man was drawn to a different part of the garden than she had been. He gravitated toward a section filled with sturdy oak trees, their massive trunks and spreading branches creating a sense of stability and permanence. She could see him settling at the base of one of the largest trees, his back against its trunk, his eyes closed as he allowed himself to simply rest. The second visitor was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, who moved with the quick, nervous energy of someone who had never learned to be still. She kept checking her phone, even here in the garden, until the device seemed to simply stop working. Elena watched as the woman's initial anxiety about her disconnected phone gradually gave way to something else. Growing awareness of the world around her, of the beauty and peace that surrounded her. She belongs to the generation that has never known true solitude, the willow explained. Always connected, always stimulated, always moving. The garden will teach her the value of silence, of being present in the moment. The young woman was drawn to a section of the garden Elena hadn't seen before, a meditation circle, surrounded by a flowering bush that seemed to pulse with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. As she sat down in the center of the circle, Elena could see the tension beginning to leave her body, her breathing slowing, her constant fidgeting gradually stilling. The third visitor surprised Elena. It was a child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, who entered the garden with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. But even from a distance, Elena could see that this child carried burdens far too heavy for such young shoulders. "The garden calls to all ages," the willow said softly. "Children are often the most wounded, but also the most receptive to healing. They haven't yet learned to doubt what they see and feel." The child ran through the garden with obvious delight, drawn immediately to a section filled with fantastical topiaries bush shaped like animals and mythical creatures. But as Elena watched, she realized that the child wasn't just playing. Each topiary seemed to come alive in some way, offering comfort and companionship to a little one who had been alone too much. Foster care, the willow explained. Moved from home to home, never quite belonging anywhere. The garden will help her understand that she is worthy of love, that she has value beyond what adults have been able to give her. Elena felt her heart ache for the child, but she also felt a fierce protectiveness rising within her. This was part of her role as guardian, to ensure that the garden remained a safe haven for all who needed it, regardless of their age or circumstances. Throughout the evening, more visitors arrived. An elderly woman grieving the loss of her husband of 50 years, who was drawn to the memory garden where the spirits of loved ones could be felt most strongly. A teenage boy struggling with questions about his identity and place in the world, who found himself in a grove where the trees seemed to mirror his own process of growth and change. A middle-aged woman facing a difficult divorce, who was called to the pool of new beginnings, where the water helped wash away old patterns and prepare for a different kind of life. Each visitor was guided to exactly what they needed, and Elena began to understand the true scope of the garden's purpose. It wasn't just a place of healing, it was a place of transformation, where people could shed the layers of pain and confusion that had accumulated over years and remember who they truly were beneath it all. As the night deepened and the last of the visitors made their way back to the gate, Elena felt the willow's attention turning toward her again. The other visitors had found what they needed and departed, their faces peaceful and their steps lighter than when they had arrived. But Elena's journey was just beginning. "It's time for you to see your inheritance," the willow said gently. "Your grandmother's cottage holds more than just her belongings. It contains the accumulated wisdom of generations of guardians, the knowledge. You'll need to serve the garden well." Elena followed a new path that led away from the central areas of the garden, winding through sections she hadn't explored yet. She passed a greenhouse filled with plants that seemed to glow with their own inner light, an herb garden where she could smell dozens of different healing scents, and a small library built into the hollow of an enormous tree. The cottage itself was exactly as she had glimpsed it from a distance, a small, perfect building that seemed to have grown naturally from the garden around it. Roses climbed its walls, their blooms releasing fragrance into the night air. Warm light spilled from the windows and smoke rose from the chimney, as if someone had just been there preparing the space for her arrival. The door opened at her approach, and Elena stepped into a space that felt immediately familiar. The cottage was larger inside than it appeared from outside another of the garden's gentle possibilities. The main room was lined with bookshelves filled with volumes on botany, herbalism, healing arts, and what appeared to be journals dating back centuries. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a comfortable chair sat nearby with a small table beside it. On the table lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with her grandmother's familiar handwriting. Elena picked it up with trembling hands and began to read. "My dearest Elena," the first entry began, "if you are reading this, then the garden has called you home and you have answered. I have been preparing for this moment for years, gathering the knowledge and tools you will need to serve as guardian. The garden chose you long ago, just as it chose me and my grandmother before me. This cottage will be your sanctuary, your place of study and preparation." Elena settled into the chair and continued reading. The journal contained detailed instructions about the garden's care, explanations of its various sections and their purposes, and most importantly, guidance on how to help the visitors who would come seeking healing. "The garden's magic is not something you control," her grandmother had written. "It is something you serve. Your role is to be present, to observe, to offer guidance when it is needed, and to trust that the garden itself will provide what each visitor requires. You will develop intuition about which areas of the garden will best serve each person. But remember, the garden always knows better than we do. Page after page contained practical wisdom, how to prepare the healing pools, which herbs to harvest, and when, how to read the signs that indicated someone was ready for deeper healing, and how to protect the garden from those who might seek to exploit its power. But it was the final entry that brought tears to Elena's eyes once again. "The garden has been the greatest gift of my life," her grandmother had written. "It has taught me that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but about remembering what was never broken in the first place. Every person who enters these gates carries within them a perfect, whole, luminous self. The garden simply helps them remember that truth. You will find, as I did, that in serving others' healing, you will discover your own deepest healing as well." Elena closed the journal and sat in the peaceful silence of the cottage. Outside, she could hear the gentle sounds of the garden settling into its nighttime rhythm, the whisper of leaves, the soft babble of the springs, the distant song of night birds. She felt a profound sense of rightness about her choice, a certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Rising from the chair, she explored the rest of the cottage. There was a small kitchen stocked with herbs and ingredients for healing teas and tinctures. A bedroom with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable, its linen smelling of lavender and rose. A study filled with more books and journals, along with tools for botanical research that were both familiar and mysteriously advanced. In the study, she found a letter addressed to her in her grandmother's handwriting. This one was shorter, more personal. "My darling girl," it read, "I know you have spent years pursuing knowledge in the outer world, and that knowledge will serve you well here. But the garden will teach you things that cannot be found in any university or laboratory. It will show you the true nature of healing, the deep connections between all living things, and the power of love to transform even the most wounded heart. Trust the garden, trust yourself, and trust the process. You are exactly who the garden needs you to be." Elena folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the desk. Tomorrow she would begin her real education as a guardian. She would learn to read the garden's subtle signs, to understand its rhythms and needs, to help guide the visitors who would come seeking healing. But tonight she simply wanted to rest in the peace of her new home, to let the profound changes of the day settle into her bones. She prepared for bed slowly, savoring each moment of this first night in her new life. The bed was even more comfortable than it had looked, and as she settled beneath the covers, she felt the garden's protective presence surrounding her like a warm embrace. Through the window, she could see the willow tree glowing softly in the moonlight, its branches swaying in a breeze that carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors, new opportunities to serve something greater than herself. But tonight, Elena Marsh, the newest guardian of the Whispering Willow's secret garden, slept more peacefully than she had in years, cradled in the arms of ancient magic and infinite love. Elena woke to the sound of gentle rain pattering against the cottage windows, but when she looked outside, she saw something extraordinary. The rain was falling only on certain sections of the garden, each drop precisely placed to water the plants that needed it most. Other areas remained dry, bathed in warm sunlight that seemed to come from no particular source. "The garden provides exactly what is needed," came the willow's voice, warm and welcoming as she stepped outside. "Just as it provided the rain for. Your emotional release last night, it provides the perfect conditions for growth and healing at all times. Elena smiled, feeling a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Her sleep had been deep and dreamless, filled with the kind of rest that heals body and soul. She felt renewed, ready to begin her first full day as guardian. "What should I do first?" she asked, settling into a comfortable rhythm of conversation with the ancient tree. "Trust your instincts," the willow replied. "The garden will guide you to what needs attention. But first, perhaps you would like to explore the sections you haven't seen yet." A guardian should know every corner of their domain. Elena spent the morning wandering through areas of the garden she had only glimpsed the night before. She discovered a maze made of flowering hedges that seemed to shift and change its pathways based on what each visitor needed to learn about themselves. She found a grove of fruit trees that bore ripe fruit in all seasons, their offerings changing to match the nutritional and spiritual needs of those who ate from them. In a quiet corner, she came upon a circle of ancient stones that hummed with a low, harmonious frequency. When she stepped inside the circle, she felt her awareness expand, suddenly able to sense the emotional states of every living thing in the garden. She could feel the contentment of the roses, the patient wisdom of the oak trees, the playful energy of the squirrels that made their homes in the branches. The empathy circle, the willow explained. It helps guardians understand the needs of both the garden and its visitors. With practice, you'll be able to sense someone's emotional state and guide them to the area of the garden that will best serve their healing. As Elena explored, she began to notice the subtle signs her grandmother had written about. Certain flowers bloomed more brightly when someone was approaching who needed their particular healing properties. The paths seemed to adjust themselves, creating clearer routes to the areas where healing was most needed. The very air carried messages, changes in temperature, shifts in the quality of light, the movement of leaves and branches that spoke of the garden's living intelligence. Near midday, she felt the first visitor approaching long before she saw them. It was a woman in her 40s, Elena sensed, carrying a burden of loneliness so profound it seemed to weigh down her very steps. Elena made her way to the main gate, arriving just as the woman appeared on the path. "Welcome," Elena said gently, opening the gate with a warm smile. "The garden has been expecting you." The woman looked surprised. "Expecting me? I didn't know. I was just walking and I saw the gate. I felt drawn to it somehow." "That's exactly how it works," Elena assured her. "The garden calls to those who need healing. My name is Elena. I'm the guardian here. Would you like me to show you around, or would you prefer to explore on your own?" The woman Sarah, she introduced herself, chose to be guided, and Elena found herself intuitively understanding exactly where Sarah needed to go. They walked together to a section of the garden Elena had discovered that morning, a grove of weeping cherry trees whose branches created intimate, private spaces perfect for solitary reflection. "My husband died 6 months ago," Sarah said quietly, as they settled beneath one of the trees. "I feel so alone, so lost. We were together for 22 years. I don't know who I am without him." Elena listened with the deep attention her grandmother had written about, offering presence rather than advice. As Sarah spoke, Elena could sense the garden responding, the cherry blossoms above them beginning to glow with a soft, comforting light. "Grief is not something to be cured," Elena found herself saying, the words coming from a wisdom deeper than her own experience. "It's something to be honored, to be held with tenderness. The garden won't take away your grief, but it can help you carry it with more grace." They spent 2 hours together, Sarah sharing memories of her husband while the garden listened with infinite patience. When Sarah finally left, her face was still sad, but peaceful in a way it hadn't been when she arrived. "You did well," the willow said as Elena watched Sarah walk back toward the gate. "You understood that your role was not to fix her pain, but to witness it, to hold space for her healing." As the days passed, Elena settled into the rhythm of guardianship. Each morning brought new visitors, each with their own stories, their own needs, their own paths to healing. She learned to read the garden's subtle communications, to sense which areas would best serve each person who came seeking help. There was Marcus, a war veteran haunted by memories of conflict, who found peace in the grove of protective oak trees. There was Lisa, a mother overwhelmed by the demands of raising 3 children alone, who discovered renewed strength in the show-length pool of self-compassion. There was David, a teenager struggling with depression, who found hope in the garden section dedicated to new growth and fresh beginnings. Elena discovered that her scientific background served her well in unexpected ways. Her understanding of plant biology helped her maintain the garden's more exotic specimens, while her research skills proved invaluable in documenting the healing properties of various garden areas. But it was the deeper mysteries that truly captured her attention. The garden, she learned, existed in layers of reality that extended far beyond the physical. In quiet moments, when she sat in meditation with the willow, she could perceive the garden's connection to a vast network of similar healing spaces around the world, other sacred groves, other sanctuary gardens, all connected by threads of light and intention. Rising from the chair, she explored the rest of the cottage. There was a small kitchen stocked with herbs and ingredients for healing teas and tinctures. A bedroom with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable, its linen smelling of lavender and rose. A study filled with more books and journals, along with tools for botanical research that were both familiar and mysteriously advanced. In the study, she found a letter addressed to her in her grandmother's handwriting. This one was shorter, more personal. "My darling girl," it read, "I know you have spent years pursuing knowledge in the outer world, and that knowledge will serve you well here. But the garden will teach you things that cannot be found in any university or laboratory. It will show you the true nature of healing, the deep connections between all living things, and the power of love to transform even the most wounded heart. Trust the garden, trust yourself, and trust the process. You are exactly who the garden needs you to be." Elena folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the desk. Tomorrow she would begin her real education as a guardian. She would learn to read the garden's subtle signs, to understand its rhythms and needs, to help guide the visitors who would come seeking healing. But tonight, she simply wanted to rest in the peace of her new home, to let the profound changes of the day settle into her bones. She prepared for bed slowly, savoring each moment of this first night in her new life. The bed was even more comfortable than it had looked, and as she settled beneath the covers, she felt the garden's protective presence surrounding her like a warm embrace. Through the window, she could see the willow tree glowing softly in the moonlight, its branches swaying in a breeze that carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors, new opportunities to serve something greater than herself. But tonight, Elena Marsh, the newest guardian of the Whispering Willow's secret garden, slept more peacefully than she had in years, cradled in the arms of ancient magic and infinite love. Elena woke to the sound of gentle rain pattering against the cottage windows, but when she looked outside, she saw something extraordinary. The rain was falling only on certain sections of the garden, each drop precisely placed to water the plants that needed it most. Other areas remained dry, bathed in warm sunlight that seemed to come from no particular source. "The garden provides exactly what is needed," came the willow's voice, warm and welcoming as she stepped outside. "Just as it provided the rain for your emotional release last night, it provides the perfect conditions for growth and healing at all times." Elena smiled, feeling a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Her sleep had been deep and dreamless, filled with the kind of rest that heals body and soul. She felt renewed, ready to begin her first full day as guardian. "What should I do first?" she asked, settling into a comfortable rhythm of conversation with the ancient tree. "Trust your instincts," the willow replied. "The garden will guide you to what needs attention. But first, perhaps you would like to explore the sections you haven't seen yet. A guardian should know every corner of their domain." Elena spent the morning wandering through areas of the garden she had only glimpsed the night before. She discovered a maze made of flowering hedges that seemed to shift and change its pathways, based on what each visitor needed to learn about themselves. She found a grove of fruit trees that bore ripe fruit in all seasons, their offerings changing to match the nutritional and spiritual needs of those who ate from them. In a quiet corner, she came upon a circle of ancient stones that hummed with a low, harmonious frequency. When she stepped inside the circle, she felt her awareness expand, suddenly able to sense the emotional states of every living thing in the garden. She could feel the contentment of the roses, the patient wisdom of the oak trees, the playful energy of the squirrels that made their homes in the branches. "The empathy circle," the willow explained. "It helps guardians understand the needs of both the garden and its visitors. With practice, you'll be able to sense someone's emotional state and guide them to the area of the garden that will best serve their healing." As Elena explored, she began to notice the subtle signs her grandmother had written about. Certain flowers bloomed more brightly when someone was approaching who needed their particular healing properties. The paths seemed to adjust themselves, creating clearer routes to the areas where healing was most needed. The very air carried messages, changes in temperature, shifts in the quality of light, the movement of leaves and branches that spoke of the garden's living intelligence. Near midday, she felt the first visitor approaching long before she saw them. It was a woman in her 40s, Elena sensed, carrying a burden of loneliness so profound it seemed to weigh down her very steps. Elena made her way to the main gate, arriving just as the woman appeared on the path. "Welcome," Elena said gently, opening the gate with a warm smile. "The garden has been expecting you." The woman looked surprised. "Expecting me? I didn't know. I was just walking and I saw the gate. I felt drawn to it somehow." "That's exactly how it works," Elena assured her. "The garden calls to those who need healing. My name is Elena. I'm the guardian here. Would you like me to show you around, or would you prefer to explore on your own?" The woman Sarah, she introduced herself, chose to be guided, and Elena found herself intuitively understanding exactly where Sarah needed to go. They walked together to a section of the garden Elena had discovered that morning, a grove of weeping cherry trees whose branches created intimate, private spaces perfect for solitary reflection. "My husband died 6 months ago," Sarah said quietly, as they settled beneath one of the trees. "I feel so alone, so lost. We were together for 22 years. I don't know who I am without him." Elena listened with the deep attention her grandmother had written about, offering presence rather than advice. As Sarah spoke, Elena could sense the garden responding. the cherry blossoms above them beginning to glow with a soft, comforting light. Grief is not something to be cured, Elena found herself saying, the words coming from a wisdom deeper than her own experience. It's something to be honored, to be held with tenderness. The garden won't take away your grief, but it can help you carry it with more grace. They spent 2 hours together, Sarah sharing memories of her husband while the garden listened with infinite patience. When Sarah finally left, her face was still sad, but peaceful in a way it hadn't been when she arrived. You did well, the willow said as Elena watched Sarah walk back toward the gate. You understood that your role was not to fix her pain, but to witness it, to hold space for her healing. As the days passed, Elena settled into the rhythm of guardianship. Each morning brought new visitors, each with their own stories, their own needs, their own paths to healing. She learned to read the garden's subtle communications, to sense which areas would best serve each person who came seeking help. There was Marcus, a war veteran haunted by memories of conflict, who found peace in the grove of protective oak trees. There was Lisa, a mother overwhelmed by the demands of raising 3 children alone who discovered renewed strength in the show-length pool of self-compassion. There was David, a teenager struggling with depression, who found hope in the garden section dedicated to new growth and fresh beginnings. Elena discovered that her scientific background served her well in unexpected ways. Her understanding of plant biology helped her maintain the garden's more exotic specimens, while her research skills proved invaluable in documenting the healing properties of various garden areas. But it was the deeper mysteries that truly captured her attention. The garden, she learned, existed in layers of reality that extended far beyond the physical. In quiet moments, when she sat in meditation with the willow, she could perceive the garden's connection to a vast network of similar healing spaces around the world, other sacred groves, other sanctuary gardens, all connected by threads of light and intention. The garden is part of something larger, the willow explained one evening as Elena sat beside its massive trunk. A web of healing that spans the globe, tended by guardians like yourself who understand that the world needs places of refuge. Spaces where the human spirit can remember its true nature. Elena could feel the truth of this, sensing the presence of other guardians working in their own sanctuaries. She began to understand that her role was not just to tend this one garden, but to help maintain the larger pattern of healing that connected all these sacred spaces. One night, as she was closing the garden after the last visitor had departed, Elena encountered something that challenged even her expanded understanding of reality. She was making her final rounds when she noticed a figure sitting by the healing springs who hadn't been there moments before. As she approached, she saw that it was an elderly woman, her silver hair braided with flowers, her clothes seeming to shimmer between different historical periods. Sometimes she appeared to be wearing a medieval healer's robes, sometimes a Victorian dress, sometimes clothing from no particular era at all. "You're not a regular visitor," Elena said, though she felt no fear, only curiosity. The woman smiled, and Elena felt a wave of warmth and recognition. "I am Aaliyah," she said, her voice carrying accents from many different languages. "I was the first guardian of this garden many centuries ago. I come sometimes to check on those who follow in my footsteps." Elena sat down beside her, feeling honored by this visitation. "The first guardian? How long has the garden existed?" "Time moves differently here," Aaliyah replied, echoing the willow's earlier words. "The garden has existed for as long as there have been human hearts in need of healing." It has taken many forms, served many purposes, but its essence remains constant. It is a place where the veil between worlds is thin, where healing can happen on levels that reach beyond the physical. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance on the water of the healing pools. Elena felt a deep connection to this ancient woman, understanding that they were part of a lineage that stretched back through time, each guardian adding their own gifts to the garden's accumulated wisdom. "You're doing well," Aaliyah said finally. "The garden chose wisely when it called you. Your scientific mind brings new understanding to old mysteries, while your open heart allows the deeper magic to work through you. Sometimes I wonder if I'm making a real difference," Elena admitted. "The visitors come and go, and I see them find peace here, but then they return to their regular lives." "Does the healing last?" Aaliyah smiled. "Watch," she said, gesturing toward the springs. The water began to glow, and Elena saw images forming in its depths, scenes of the people who had visited the garden over the past weeks. She saw Sarah, the widow, now volunteering at a grief support group, her own healing allowing her to help others process their losses. She saw Marcus, the veteran, planting a garden behind his apartment building, creating his own small sanctuary for other veterans in his neighborhood. She saw Lisa, the overwhelmed mother, teaching her children to meditate using techniques she had learned in the garden's quiet spaces. "The healing that happens here ripples outward," Aaliyah explained. "Each person who finds peace in the garden becomes a source of healing in their own community. The garden's influence extends far beyond these walls, touching lives that may never know this place exists." Elena felt a profound sense of purpose wash over her. She was not just tending a garden, she was helping to weave a web of healing that touched countless lives, creating ripples of peace and transformation that would spread through the world in ways she might never fully comprehend. As her first year as guardian progressed, Elena discovered that the garden changed with the seasons, though not in the way she had expected. While the outer world moved through its familiar cycle of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the garden followed its own deeper rhythms, attuned to the spiritual and emotional needs of its visitors. During what the garden called its season of renewal, the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. New areas of the garden revealed themselves, hidden groves perfect for meditation, secret pathways that led to overlooks where visitors could gain new perspectives on their lives. The healing pools deepened, their waters taking on properties that helped people release old traumas and embrace new chapters in their lives. The season of abundance brought visitors who needed to remember their own worth and value. The fruit trees in the garden bore extraordinary harvest, their offerings sweet and nourishing. The flower beds bloomed with unprecedented beauty, their colors so vivid they seemed to glow from within. During this time, Elena learned to help visitors recognize their own inner abundance, their own capacity for joy and fulfillment. The season of reflection was quieter, more contemplative. The garden's colors became more muted, its paths more winding, encouraging visitors to slow down and look inward. This was when people came to process major life changes, to sit with difficult questions, to find clarity in confusion. Elena found herself becoming more of a listener during this season, offering presence and witness rather than guidance. The Yimdidi season of rest was the most profound. During this time, the garden seemed to draw inward, its energies focused on deep healing and regeneration. Fewer visitors came, but those who did arrived with the most serious wounds, the deepest needs. Elena learned to work with the garden's most powerful healing energies during this season, helping to facilitate transformations that touch the very core of a person's being. As the seasons cycled, Elena grew into her role with increasing confidence and wisdom. She learned to trust the garden's guidance completely, to follow its subtle promptings without question. She discovered that her own healing continued to deepen as she served others, that in helping to tend the garden's magic, she was constantly tending her own spiritual growth. The cottage became truly her home, filled with journals documenting her experiences, with pressed flowers from the garden's most special moments, with letters from visitors who had found healing within these walls. She established correspondence with other guardians around the world, sharing knowledge and insights that helped all of them serve their calling more effectively. But perhaps the most significant change was in Elena herself. The driven, anxious academic who had first stumbled through the garden gate had been transformed into someone who moved with quiet confidence, who carried peace within her like a candle, flame that could not be extinguished. She had learned to trust not just the garden's wisdom, but her own inner knowing, her own capacity to serve something greater than herself. On the anniversary of her first night in the garden, Elena sat beneath the willow tree, reflecting on the year that had passed. Hundreds of visitors had found their way to the garden, each leaving with some measure of healing, some new understanding of their own strength and resilience. "You have grown well into your role," the willow observed, its voice warm with approval. "The garden is flourishing under your care." Elena smiled, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from work that aligned with her soul's purpose. "I've learned so much this year, not just about the garden, but about healing, about what it means to serve others." "And what have you learned?" the willow asked. Elena considered the question carefully. "I've learned that healing is not about fixing what's broken, but about remembering what was never broken in the first place. I've learned that everyone carries within them a perfect whole self that can never be damaged, only temporarily forgotten. And I've learned that the greatest healing happens not when we try to change people, but when we create space for them to remember who they truly are." "Wise words," the willow agreed. "And what of your own healing? What have you discovered about yourself in this year of service?" Elena felt tears of gratitude spring to her eyes. "I've learned that I am enough, exactly as I am. I've learned that my worth doesn't depend on external achievements or other people's approval. I've learned that I belong here in this sacred work, in this beautiful life. And I've learned that love given freely and without condition is the most powerful healing force in the universe." As if in response to her words, the entire garden seemed to pulse with a gentle light. Every flower glowed a little brighter, every tree rustled with approval, every pool reflected the stars with unusual clarity. The garden was celebrating. Elena realized not just her anniversary as guardian, but the completion of her own deepest healing. "The garden chose well," the willow said, its voice filled with ancient joy. "You have become not just a guardian, but a true healer, a bridge between the world of everyday concerns and the realm of infinite possibility. The garden's magic flows through you now, and wherever you go, you carry its healing presence." Elena understood then that her role as guardian was not confined to the physical boundaries of the garden. She'd become a living extension of its healing power, someone who could offer sanctuary and peace to everyone she encountered. The garden lived within her now, a constant source of wisdom and compassion that she could draw upon no matter where life might take her. As the night deepened, Elena felt the presence of all the guardians who had come before her, their love and wisdom joining with her own. She sensed the network of healing that connected all the sacred spaces around the world, felt her own role in maintaining the web of compassion that helped hold the world together. The garden would continue to call to those who needed healing, and she would continue to answer, serving as a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the earth and the modern needs of human hearts. Visitors would come and go, each finding exactly what they needed, each leaving a little lighter, a little more whole, a little more connected to their own inner radiance. And in the quiet moments between visitors, Elena would sit with the willow tree, tending the garden's magic, nurturing its growth, and deepening her own understanding of what it meant to be a servant of healing in a world that desperately needed the peace and wisdom the garden offered. The Whispering Willow's secret garden would continue to flourish, a sanctuary of healing that existed outside of time, a place where the wounded could find wholeness, where the lost could find their way home, and where the magic of unconditional love could work its quiet miracles in the depths of human hearts. And Elena Marsh, botanist turned guardian, scientist turned healer, would continue to serve as its faithful keeper, tending the sacred space where heaven and earth met, where healing happened, and where the deepest truths of human existence could be remembered, honored, and shared with all who were ready to receive them. The garden slept peacefully in the moonlight, its ancient willows standing sentinel over the healing waters, the sacred groves, the pathways of transformation. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the night wind, came the sound of gentle footsteps, another soul in need of healing, drawn by the garden's irresistible call, ready to discover the magic that waited within its ancient loving embrace. The end, and so our story concludes, dear listeners, with Elena settled into her role as guardian of the Whispering Willow's secret garden. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you too will find yourself walking along a luminous path, discovering your own secret garden of healing and peace. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be filled with the gentle magic of renewal and love.